Greetings. Welcome to the Money Script Podcast. I'm your host, Johanse Harrison, financial advisor and financial literacy educator. In each episode, you'll hear incredible interviews and get tips and strategies that you can implement into your daily life to help you improve your money script and grow your wealth. Thank you for taking some time with me today. Let's get into this episode of the Money Script. Welcome back, everyone. It is so good to be with you again. It has been an interesting 10 days. Oh my goodness. The Twitter feed, the news channel, everyone's in on the action. Instagram, Facebook, everybody's talking about finances, and money. Market is at center of the attention. We are down over 10%, I believe, at the time of this taping. And we're officially in correction territory. So I want to correct from the previous episode. I said it's a bear market, not a bear in the woods. We are officially not in a bear market. Thank you for correcting me on that. Yes, we are not in a bear market yet. I say yet because it's beginning to look a lot like inevitable at this point. I'm not going to take the over under on that, but it's not looking good. So a bear market is when major indexes have gone down 20% below their most recent high. And a correction is when it goes down 10% below the most recent high. So we went down to about 13 and to 14 and some change, depending on which index you look at. So not quite 20. But definitely in correction territory. And we've just been bouncing since then, bouncing up one day, down the next, up one day, down the next. This is so reminiscent of what we went through in late 2008 and 2009. So reminiscent of that. They're starting to bring up the R word again, recession. Recession is when there are two quarters of negative GDP, gross domestic product. That is the output, if you will, of us as citizens here in the United States. If we have two negative quarters, then the economy is said to be in a recession. We always try to look back and say what caused the recession. Oh, it was the housing market, or it was, the flu or coronavirus. I don't know. We always look back and try to backfill the story and say, okay, what was the straw that broke the camel's back, and more on that later. And so there are some common themes that come with recessions. Some of the common themes are, if you look back at all the recessions that we've had in history, and there's been dozens of them, we'll talk about that in another show, but the common themes are high interest rates, which we don't have right now. We have low interest rates. As a matter of fact, the Fed just cut rates. You've probably heard that the Treasury yield is the lowest it's ever been. It's below 1% on the 10-year Treasury yield. And we're talking about Treasury bonds where people, municipalities, corporations, other governments, they loan money to the United States. You buy a Treasury bond, and the United States then pays interest on that bond and then pays the principal back. So the 10-year Treasury yield is below 1% for 10 years. I mean, that's a pretty weak outlook on the future. Weak outlook on the future. So high interest rates are typically come with recessions, or on the way into recessions, or they say a cause of it. So that's not happening. Real wages as compared to the cost of living have become a problem. Now that's something, if you've been paying attention to, the election that's coming up, that is something that Democrats are talking a lot about. And now that Bernie has a big platform right now, he's talked about that a long time, about wages not keeping up with inflation, how people working jobs for many years and not having any real increases, but the cost of living continues to increase. And that is a real thing. I've seen that with clients over the years that are in certain positions. So real wages are a problem. So that in the past, if you look back at other recessions, that's been one of the causations of a recession. Will it be the causation of this one? I don't know, but that's a real thing that's out there. And another one that tends to come with recessions is consumer confidence goes down. Now, that's one we're really experiencing right now. That is what this coronavirus is doing to society. It's causing people to have less confidence in going out and spending money. You have companies that are canceling large conventions. You have cruise ships that are, stuck offshore with people on them. and you have a genuine fear. There's airlines talking about the planes are empty. And they haven't lowered ticket prices yet, but I'll tell you what has lowered is the stock prices of airlines. So you might want to check that out. Risky stocks, by the way, but hey, there's opportunity. There's opportunity there. So the R word is starting to come up. So in recessions, what happens in a recession? Like I said, it's when we have negative 2 quarters of negative GDP, and then we would be in a recession. So we could be going into it now. So we have a quarter that's ending really soon, and it's highly likely that's going to be a negative quarter. I mean, there's some things that I don't know because I'm not an economist, but just if I'm looking at some of the data I'm getting, there's a pretty good chance that first quarter is going to be negative, and then the question would be, can we bounce back in the second quarter to avoid it? But what happens in recessions? Well, companies cut back on spending because there is a bleak outlook for the future. So companies will defer investments, decide not to build that additional restaurant, decide not to build that new plant, things of that nature. And that happens on the large level for large companies. It also happens on the small level with the mom and pop companies, maybe deciding not to invest, deciding not to expand their operations because they think that people are starting to hold on to their wallets. Layoffs happen, so companies will start laying people off because there's no work for them. That's already happening in the hotel industry, because as these conventions get canceled, those are contracts that then get canceled, and those are people that were coming to work those conventions. The people that provide the food, the people that provide the linens, and on and on and on. There's a lot that goes into these large conventions, and so we're already experiencing jobs that are being lost. We've already hearing about companies doing hiring freezes. However, the mortgage and lending industry is hiring right now because mortgage interest rates are at I think what I heard was almost an 8-month or 10-month low. So that's exciting for those of you out there that have home loans. You might want to check on refinancing. Student loans, you might want to check on refinancing. If you have any debt that you just need to refinance, now is a good time to think about doing it. You might not get a better rate for a long time. So yeah, as those layoffs happen, people see that their friends are getting laid off, or someone that they know, 6 degrees of separation, is getting laid off. And so that causes us as consumers to hold on a little bit tighter to the money that we have. We save a little more, spend a little bit less because we think that bad times are ahead. And that's how that we just kind of snowball ourselves into the recession. It's one of those things where once that straw has broken the camel's back, that's it. The camel's he's not going anywhere. His back is broken. So speaking of the straw that broke the camel's back, that you've probably heard that phrase before. And there is an artist that really had a verse and it really stayed with me and helped me understand or really think differently about the straw that broke the camel's back, because we always focus on that straw. And that artist, it's Moze or now, Yasin Bey, has a song called Mathematics. And in Mathematics, he states, why did the one straw break the camel's back? Here's the secret. The million other straws underneath it. It's all mathematics. So as we think about this coronavirus and how this is the straw that is breaking the back of the market, and we're finally, coming off these highs and we're down all these percentages and the volatility's here. And there are companies, individual companies that are down 40, 50, and 60%. Okay. So there's some people, there's a lot of money on paper that's kind of disappearing right now. But again, just remember that if the coronavirus is that straw that broke the camel's back, there was a million other straws underneath it. We have been in a bull market for over a decade. This thing was bound to come to an end. Will coronavirus even do it? Because remember, we're not in a bear market yet. We're not in a recession yet. We're just in a correction. And corrections happen every 20, 18, or 19 months. They happen often. Okay. It just happened. You probably don't even remember, but in 2018, on December 25th, in 2018, the S&P 500 was down 18.5, almost 19% from its most recent high. Okay. So this happened in 2018. So how quickly we forget. But is this the time that we finally have go down to negative, have 2 negative quarters of GDP? And do we go into a recession? Do we go into the layoffs? All that stuff. No one knows. What you do know is you get to focus on your own economy. Focus on what's going on in your household. What are some of the things that you can do? Number one, pay down debt that you have. Okay. If tough times are coming ahead, you don't want to get stuck with high interest credit cards, would have you taken away from your purchasing power. Review your budget. Find ways that you can cut back so that you can save more money. Now, I know that kind of self-perpetuates the prophecy of us going into a recession if you're spending less. But again, we have to worry about your economy. Okay. So reduce your discretionary spending. If you're in a job that you know that you could be effective, you're in hotels and hospitality, you want to start thinking about, okay, what if they have to cut back my hours? Okay. You want to start thinking about those things right now. Of course, stock up on not only your money that you're putting money in the bank, but buy things on sale. If the toilet paper's on sale, grab extra roll. Now, don't go in there and clean out the whole store. I know it's happening all over the country. There's runs on stores, and stores are running out of water and toilet paper. I mean, don't be selfish, but if you find out it's on sale over the next few months, while this hype may die down, if it dies down, and you happen to be in the store, pick up an extra roll. Okay, pick up some extra dry goods, canned goods, what have you, just so that if times get lean for you, you can still take care of your family, because we don't want you having to use something other than toilet paper. That'd be disastrous. And then, of course, keep investing, or start investing. But make sure you're careful. Of course, investing has risk. This is not over. We'll be talking about this for a long time. I've got a great conversation that I had with my good friend, Tony Moze, entrepreneur extraordinaire. If you're not following him on Instagram, I encourage you to do it. This guy, he's hilarious. He's energetic. He's all about financial literacy. So anyways, I won't keep you from it. Hope I helped give you some thoughts on what's going on for the past, I guess almost 2 weeks now. Sorry I was gone, but now I'm back. And let's get into this interview with Tony Moze. I've been watching this gentleman grow for at least the last 5 years, and I'm really excited to have Tony Moze on the show with us today. He's going to share some of his insights on building wealth and becoming more financially literate. So without any further ado, let's dive in. Tony, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to the people?
What's up, everybody? It's Tony Moze, and I want you to take action to pursue your passion. And if you need to find me, you can find me on Instagram at Tony_Moze, and my email at TonyMoze500@gmail.com.
Tony, tell us about the Tony Moze brand. Where did that all begin?
So on social media, I built a brand, freelance brand. I was doing both as a hobby, and then also helping small businesses, or at least authors. What I was doing was rhyming book reviews. So it all started off from, basically me reading a lot of books, and of course me rapping. So I've been rapping since I was 9 years old. I was acting in the drama troops back in elementary school. And I was a very much, then I was rapping at 14, acting at 9, and also reading heavily since elementary school. And I decided to fuse some things together back in 2015, as I was, noticing that people were doing book reviews, but I wanted to serve a certain community of people who, may not necessarily get the chance to know that this exists out there. And so I put in a different twist where I combined, hip hop music videos summarizing nonfiction books. And these books were in like personal development, entrepreneurship, psychology, sociology, the books that I was reading a lot from, from college, during my times when I was going into graduate school, and then also in recent times when I got into entrepreneurship. So that, I think because of those books, it got me to crystallize a little bit more into where I am today, as well as, seeing what my mom did when I was a kid with some of her money choices, and also seeing the contrast between my father and then my stepdad. And then it was almost like a rich dad, poor dad kind of like dynamic, brought me here to this day where I am like, very like much trying to continue, spreading the word and the importance of financial literacy, and also the idea that more Black, or people of color should be on the train of building generational wealth.
Mm, well put. Well put. You did mention in there the Rich Dad Poor Dad, one of my personal favorites. We appreciate you doing some of that hard work for us. I know it's sometimes a struggle to get individuals to open up a book, and I encourage people, if you feel like you don't have the time to sit down and read, listening to books is also a great way to consume. I probably consume at least 1 to 2 audibles per month on through Amazon, and it's not the most I'll say efficient way from a financial standpoint, but that's the way I choose to do it. There are other ways to consume books through audible means as well. So that's awesome. I just have to ask, what would you say is your actually, I don't want to say favorite. What would you say is your most impactful financial literacy or business book that you read?
I've been on the whole series of Robert Kiyosaki books. I'm gonna say I'm very thankful for YouTube. So just to obviously promote YouTube more for people out there who may not necessarily have the funds, or even though I would recommend purchasing it, but you can go on YouTube and find free audiobooks, and there are a
Wow.
lot of them out there in personal development. And I forgot, I don't know if it was all in one day, but I was just hopping on to the next book, listening to Robert Kiyosaki's audiobooks in their entirety. And so, like, the whole Rich Dad, Poor Dad, cash flow quadrant, investment, before you quit your job. I mean, like, I think one night I listened to it, like, I listened to 4 of his books. And then, of course, I read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which, of course, I did a rhyming book review on YouTube. If anybody wants to check it out, go to youtube.com/Tony Moze, and you could find the rhyming book review just to see what I do. But yeah, I would say the one that's been the most impactful has been Robert Kiyosaki. He's been just writing consecutively, like just consistently great books.
He has. I agree. And him and his daughter have a podcast as well. That's in my list of podcasts that I'm continually cycling through. So that's another good resource to pick that up. Now, you mentioned, Tony, that you had a rich dad, poor dad sort of experience yourself. You said between your father and stepfather. As I ask every guest that's on the show, if you would share with us what was your first recognition or impression of money, and how has that developed to where you are today?
Yeah, so I mean, let's see here. I had my mom and dad, of course, before they divorced. My mom was definitely more. She was definitely more money conscious compared to my bio dad. My mom, of course, was very entrepreneurial. She always tried to seek out and look for any opportunity, whether that was cleaning houses, having an in-home nail salon. They also had a pest control business, and then also they were cleaning homes as well. They were doing housekeeping. And my mom would, of course, rent out a truck during the summertime, sometimes just to make a little extra cash. So she was always looking for opportunities. I mean, she was a nurse as well, and so she was always like just making a lot of money. My dad, of course, I mean, he was more of the whole poverty consciousness mindset. No diss to him, but if, of course, looking at it objectively, he wasn't necessarily in the mentality of believing that he can get out of a certain situation, unlike my mom, who did. And I remember when I was a kid, even though we were living in the hood, like we were living, in Yonkers, the Yonkers Bronx area of New York. Uh, it got to a point where when I was living with my dad and my parents divorced, he was collecting food stamps, and I just saw how like much he was struggling. But my mom I think she bought about 4 or 5 different bonds, and I think this was the very thing that I keep in my head still to this day. She bought me bonds in denominations of $25, $50, $75, and I think $100. And she bought some McDonald's fund or whatever, where apparently, the sense of all of them were that if you keep and hold on to these little, because $100, that's not a lot. I mean, you think about it, people buy sneakers twice the size, twice the amount of that. And she bought in just that kind of amount back in the 80s. And, you know, I just remembered like the whole idea of compound interest. And I knew that even as a kid looking at it, I was like, when I get older, I'm going to be able to cash these. Unfortunately, I didn't have a chance to. My dad took those
Oh,
and he spent them on himself, and he bought liabilities instead of assets. He didn't even know. I don't even, to be honest with you, my dad still to this day doesn't even know what a liability or asset is. Of course, unfortunately, I'm teaching him now, much like I'm teaching my family and I'm teaching others. But he bought himself shoes, suits, watches. I mean, he was just basically being frivolous in a wrong way. Like he wasn't even being frivolous, like in the most like, financially, savvy way, like meaning like buying assets that's going to compound and accrue interest. And so I remember seeing him waste that money and then still being in debt and still worrying and suffering. And I just remember the pain he was going through. And I try to keep that in my mind. Now, that trickled over into me because, from my teenage years, I had a job working in the teenage years. I served in the Army. Once I got out of the Army, I was, working some restaurant job and other like, menial jobs while I was going to college. But nevertheless, I was never saving anything. I may have invested here and there, but very small time change. Like maybe I put like $20 into like a E-bond or an I-bond. This was back in like, I don't remember,
that's
2001.
yeah. That'd be
And
the
like I
late
think it made
'90s, the
like,
I bonds. Yep, I remember those.
yeah. And I mean, at that time or whatever I invested in, I look back at it, it only made like $75. But nevertheless, because of my mother, she still would remind you should save your money, even though she wasn't really directly like holding my hands as I was growing up. Just the whispers in my ear of like, you should save your money, you should invest your money. It didn't really hit me until recent times, And so, of course, I started buying stocks, I started buying bonds. And then as the years started going by, like especially when I was doing the rhyming book reviews in 2015, I started getting more like keen and I started just being more savvy and listening and reading more books and attending seminars and, and picking people's brains. And like, I and my thing, of course, right now is just building upon portfolios. I mean, just saying right now, like I bought stocks, I have life insurance policy, universal life insurance policy. I bought bonds. What else is there? I'm using apps like the Acorn app, just anything that I could just toss money in just to get into the exercise. And the thing is, people are thinking, man, I got to put like thousands of dollars in it. But no, there's like apps out there right now where you could put fractions of what a share is, like a M1 Financial, or you could just put in money that's hanging out on your sofa in a sense on this app called Acorns, and you could find yourself like start building wealth right there. I feel the journey to 1,000 steps starts with a single one.
Absolutely.
And and so I still keep in my head that whole idea when my mother bought those 4 little paper bonds and that McDonald's I think check or whatever it was. And of course, nevertheless, it was still small time when we cashed it out. I think about 2 years ago, it was about $2,000. It was nevertheless the idea that my mother bought it at like maybe $20 back in the 80s and it made this
Mm,
much. Now imagine if you put $2,000 in it, or $200, or $5,000 in something like this that would guarantee you that it's going to accrue at a certain percentage every year. Just think about it. If you can play the waiting game, whether you wait 5, 10, 15, 30 years, you'll be amassing wealth. And like I said, like it put that in my noodle. Like I teach my daughter this whole idea too about how important it is to save. And I actually even hold her hand. So, I had my mom to be able to be the one who put that little spark in my head. Now I'm following through by actually holding my own kid's hand and looking at what like these apps do, understanding what a share is, doing even like a little class where I'm like writing on a dry erase board what everything means. And she's only 10 years old, but nevertheless, it's in her head. And the fact that she's 10 and she only has and the fact that she's 10 and has $80 already for herself is a good start. I already tell her that, like, look, you want to start saving half of your paycheck, now, because we were calculating, like, let's pretend that it didn't accrue, right? Like, let's pretend that there wasn't something that was paying dividends, at 6 to 12%. And you're just saving your paycheck right now at the age of, or at the age of like 15, 16, whenever she starts a job. And she continues this whole idea till she's my age, which my age is 37. She will have, I forgot what calculations I said. I mean, just saying hypothetically what the jobs are paying now, but like also teaching her the whole idea of finding creating business systems that give value to people would be freaking, invaluable to herself and to others. And just like all these things that I'm teaching, but nevertheless, where it started from was seeing those paper bonds hanging out in a little photoed suitcase that my mom left there. And then it just went on from there. So
Wow.
I thank her for giving me that visual, just seeing those paper bonds when I was living with my dad. Even though we were like still living in the hood and he was paying, he was still receiving, what you call
Food stamps, you were saying.
food stamps, and he was struggling and worrying and all that stuff like that, and spending his money on like trips and suits and shoes. I still kept that on my mind. So going back to the rich dad, poor dad dynamic, though, I'm seeing my dad. He's the guy in the, you'd say poverty consciousness, the guy that's still struggling to this day. And of course, my goal is to obviously put him in a better area, thanks to me being the one who's going out there and hunting for all this information. But then I have my stepdad on the other hand, who, he's always finding good jobs. He's investing his money, whether it's in 401k or a stock market. I mean, at least he's trying that. So it showed the drastic differences in lifestyle, seeing like, reminding myself like, okay, where do you want to continue being? Do you remember how you felt this way when you had no money? Do you remember when you saw in your bank account it was red because it was minus? You had no money to be able to even buy yourself food. Do you remember how you were crying in your car? Like how like these feelings were just what finally made me stand up and say, you know what? I can't take this anymore. I got to put this into action. And the problem is that a lot of us, of course, anyone who comes from the whole upbringing of nevertheless being the person of color, but the person coming from an impoverished, environment, the whole idea that's set into motion or into the minds of many people who come from that environment is that you will never be able to get out of that environment. So just continue doing what you're doing. And I think that's BS. I think that people do have a little bit more control in their lives than they think they do.
You brought something up that reminded me of, I remember when the Jordans came out, and I was, my brother wanted a pair, I believe, and I think I was 5 or 6 years old. And so I went back and did the research. The cost of a pair of Jordans in 1985 was $65.
Wow.
Today, on average, a pair of Jordans is, call it $200.
Hmm.
In 1985, Nike stock was $10 a share.
Wow.
If you had purchased 6 shares at $10 a share in 1985, after splits, dividends, all that fun stuff, today you'd have 384 shares.
Huh.
It would be worth close to $34,000. The math I did, I said I could buy everyone in the room 10 pair of Jordans.
Basically.
So you bring up a good point when as you're speaking to your daughter. I had similar conversations with my son. I have a son who's 18, and then I have a daughter who's 2. I had to think about that because I don't know how old she is some days. But with the 18-year-old, we had similar conversations, and sometimes boys can be a little bit a bit of a knucklehead. But he did accept the fact that he needed to start investing his money. And he will tell you, if you ask him anything about he has a Roth IRA. He's so excited. He bought Apple stock when it was like $150 a share. So he's doing cartwheels. It's like, oh, Dad, if this keeps up, I'll have enough, to buy a new cell phone when it comes out 2 years from now, or buy 10 of them, just because he bought it so early. I am extremely appreciative that you are having those conversations with your daughter, teaching her to save half her money, and doing those whiteboard conversations and teaching them what it means to own a share of stock, or to, like you said, be in the service industry and be able to give people something of value, because that's something she'll be able to cash in on that for the rest of her life. Yeah. Literally for the rest of her life. So I'm really excited to hear that. So tell me, when did you make the transition from employee to entrepreneur?
It was when I was working in the healthcare system. I was working with children, adolescents, all the way till adults. And I just, as I was reading books, I was getting a lot new information, especially that on mindset and how you can change your mindset through what you think. it was a paradigm shift for me because I came from the school of thought of psychology. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology. I have my master's degree in psychology, and I was actually going to go to school for my doctorate in psychology. Also, of course, PhD. There's two types. There's the doctor in psychology, which is the PsyD, and then there's the PhD in clinical psychology. So, but I was still going off of a different paradigm where it was about like treating the negativity, the lack, the limitation of people. And of course, vicariously, that went on to the person who's consuming it. A lot of us too, like were focused on that area. But then I noticed that there was this, there was positive psychology looking at more of the positive areas. And I started looking at, things in regards to that, into like how you can now look at things in a more abundance mindset. And of course, that trickled into money. But when I was working in the healthcare system, I mean, I did that for about 10 years. I got, burnt out, and I said I wanted something new. I was visualizing where I wanted to be in life, health, wealth, love, and happiness wise. And that got me to move out of Connecticut. And now I live in Boston. And of course, because of that, it gave me newer opportunities. So, right around that time, as I was almost getting out of Connecticut, I decided that I wanted to be able to give value to people, but I didn't necessarily see it in a way that was earning money. So what I did was I was focusing on it, and I was reading the books, and I was communicating and doing podcasts with other great names. Uh, but I was slowly starting to get into the business mode, the business mentality. And then eventually I started getting some customers. And while I was doing that as well, it got me into other entrepreneurial endeavors, such as working in network marketing, selling life insurance annuities. I worked for, of course, Patrick Bet David, um, who's also another big entrepreneur. If people don't know who he is, he has a YouTube channel called Valuetainment, has about, I think, almost 2 million subscribers. If not, if already is out there right now,
Wow.
and it's a number one channel for entrepreneurs. Um, and just like constantly just being really savvy. And so, I had my startup, and it was in ideation. So I went to a startup leadership program, which is based in Boston. So it's basically like a pseudo incubator type, and it was basically fusing education and entertainment together. As I believe in theory that, or at least I theorize that more people are going to want to learn in a different way. And I'm still trying to ride that wave of education technology, but I still nevertheless have been like in the whole entrepreneurial route, whether I'm networking, whether I'm, of course, working on ideas, startup ideas, or I'm doing little side gigs, such as building people's websites, uh, but yeah, it was about 5 years ago where I just said, I want to change. I want my life to change. I want things to be different. And I started doing that through reading the books and just shifting my mentality. And just so happened, I just jumped onto entrepreneurship.
Beautiful. I love it. Well, welcome to the lovely the lovely game of entrepreneurship. I too, like you, spent many years in corporate America. I think 14 and a half of them to be exact. And then eventually emancipated myself and said, you know what? I get to do this on my own. And I've had more fun doing this than anything else I've done in life. And I see myself doing this until literally I cannot do it anymore.
Great.
And which is a beautiful feeling to wake up and be excited about what the day is going to hold. Because there's so many people out there, and so many of our listeners, I'm sure you may be the type of person that dreads going to work every day.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have to be that way, but it will take a huge investment into your mindset, as Tony mentioned, a huge investment into educating yourself on what's out there, and a huge investment into just belief and believing of what could be possible for you, and just, never giving up. So with that, I want to be respectful of your time, Tony. I really appreciate you spending some time with us on the Money Script podcast today. If you would, could you give, if you would put in, if this is the only 2.5 minutes that they listened to this show, they fell asleep during the first part, what would be your words of encouragement or advice for those that are looking to break into entrepreneurship and just take more control of their financial life?
So, in terms of entrepreneurship, I would say, you know,
do how it worked for me, and I think it would work for a lot of people too, is the idea of, if you feel a certain way, like if it brings you some passion, it brings you joy, and you are like, you really feel like, wow, like this is what I can get up to in the morning, and to couple that with it giving value to a set demographic of people, I would say do it. um I it started there. It started from a place of pain in my life, and so I used that, of course, to find better ways to be more, to counter how I was feeling. And so I approached things that I was passionate about, and so I came up with doing digital marketing, and I was helping a niche of self-published authors, of course, doing it in a way that nobody else was doing, which of course gave me a little bit of an edge. And also, it was fulfilling a certain market that I was already like a part of. I was a guy who was writing, and of course, I have a few books that are almost done. Uh, some of it's on mindset, law of attraction, other things on, other areas of personal development, and some other like kind of cute, fun things that people may want to, may be interested in. But like, I came from it from a place of pain, which then became a place of passion, and then it also served a community of people. And so I think people definitely need to figure out what is it that they love doing, and then how can they take that passion and give value to others.
Thanks for joining us on the Money Script podcast. Be sure to check out our other episodes, subscribe, follow, and give us 5 stars. Continue to send your financial questions on Twitter or Instagram at the Money Script. Go to moneyscriptwealth.com and schedule your complimentary consultation to discuss your specific goals and concerns. Financial advisory and investment management services are offered by Money Script Wealth Management PLLC, a registered investment advisory firm registered in the state of Texas and California and other states where exempt. The Money Script LLC and the Money Script Wealth Management PLLC and guests of the episode may have interest in the investments mentioned today. The opinions and views are expressed here are for informational purposes only. This material is educational in nature and should not be deemed as a solicitation for any specific product or service. All investments involve risk and a significant loss of principal. The Money Script nor Money Script Wealth Management offer tax or legal advice. Please consult your tax advisor or attorney for specific advice about your situation. Until next time.